Great. Thank you, guys. We'll do bonus. You can ask a question anytime. We'll do it before, during, after. Excited to be here. Thanks to the fine folks at True for having me. Excited that this room is filled up here. So obviously there's a few people that want to hear some secrets here. But yeah, just excited to talk to you guys a little bit about my journey. Kind of give you the inside secrets of what I think worked, didn't work at a couple of those companies. And like I said, feel free to ask any questions at any point. All right, so they kind of gave a quick background on my companies I've worked with. But I should say before I moved over to the B2B side of the house, I came from the B2C. So I actually did my first startup right out of college. By the way, this does remind me of college. Doesn't that feel a little weird? Like we're back in college. All right, sorry. Anyways, that was back in '96. I was graduating from University of Illinois. I didn't even know that VCs existed. So we did a startup with 3 other co-founders. We were located all over the US, and we had to become profitable because that's what they taught me in business school. And we grew to 10 million members. We actually had an early SaaS membership play, so we had gold, silver, platinum. We had advertising revenue, and eventually we sold it. And it was just something that I think kind of got in my DNA is not just scaling and growing companies where you get large amounts of money, but how can you do it efficiently? And how can you scale so you truly get that hyper growth? That's always been fun. So after that one, that was Case's Ladder. I moved on to really a lot of media news sites, publishing sites. So IGN Entertainment, which does a lot of the gaming side of the house, AskMen, Rotten Tomatoes. We grew that up to, I think, 100 million in revenue and sold that to News Corp. We had some fine member, David, that was also part of that team there. And then we went over to News Corp, where I led an online marketing team for a lot of their properties. So that's everything from American Idol, Fox News, Fox Sports, MySpace at that time. I was not part of MySpace, I just want for the record. Nothing wrong with it, but but anyway, and then I got a call from Salesforce, and they were looking to introduce a little B2C DNA into the B2B process. And it was something that I was super excited about. And so I went over and I had a chance to meet Mark and just really believed in the cloud. And you gotta remember, like, the cloud that so many of our businesses are built on, 10 years ago, everyone was really scared of it. It's like, you want me to give my most valuable information, you're gonna put it off somewhere in the ether and it's gonna be safe, right? And that was just the land of on-prem at those days. But I just believed in that vision. It was just so much simpler than the on-prem, installing CDs and IT. It just was this revolutionary, groundbreaking movement. And I loved it. But when I started to shift into the B2B side of the house and I started talking with other leaders and other people that had kind of done their own marketing for these, I was actually surprised. I was like, wow, there's tremendous innovation at a product level. But when I looked at the go-to-market model, I'm like, God, these tactics feel like they're from 30 years ago. It was write a press release, do a big event, steak dinner for the CIO, sell from the top down in. And I just always thought like we should bring the same level of passion, innovation, disruption to the go-to-market model, right? The marketing, sales, success, support, as we do to our product side, right? And ultimately, these can be key differentiators for us. So that was a lot of fun. Spent some time then at Zendesk. I was a CMO. I kind of came in as actually really like one of the first marketing employees there and built that entire team up from scratch. So that was a lot of fun to kind of come in an early stage, kind of have a white canvas, build a really modern go-to-market motion, the marketing side. And then I went over to, we took the company public, and then I went over to Slack. And again, I came in, I think I was like employee 50-ish. I was the first kind of go-to-market employee. So there I led the marketing, sales, success, and support teams, built those teams out. And I've been doing just operator roles for about 20 years. And as much as I loved them, I'd always been asked on kind of another step in my career. And it was like, do I go down the VC path? Or do we kind of go down the advisor/board member path? And I decided on the latter. And so now I have a lot of fun advising other high growth companies. They're small stages on seed. They go to pre-IPO. But for me, it's just fun partnering with great founders and helping them grow their sales, marketing, success, and support. Cool. So I'm going to now walk you through some of the lessons that I learned that I thought worked really well. The first one is this idea of customer centricity. I think a lot of companies talk about like, hey, we're all about the customer. Yeah, customer's great, right? But when you kind of double click on it, there's not a lot of strategy specific to it. There aren't a lot of metrics specific to it. The teams aren't organized around that. And I think at the end of the day, one thing I got from Mark at Salesforce was he was just obsessed with customer centricity. He always wanted us to be having these incredibly successful customers that we were just minting out, right? And they were the source of everything. And we really tried to organize all the teams around that to make sure that these customers were successful. But when you kind of like did a layer down on there, I said, well, I don't just want customer centricity. I want to think about like, how do we think about metrics that actually guide these teams? And so after I left Salesforce and I went over to Zendesk as a CMO, I said, what if we tried a different approach? Right? I think if you go to a lot of the other sessions here today, and they'll talk about marketing or sales, they'll usually have very traditional funnel metrics, will be their kind of success metrics, right? So for marketing, you have leads or MQLs, and sales, you'll have closed deals and ACV and et cetera. But if you think about that, a lot of times those metrics are not optimized around the customer experience. And I've bought a lot of software in my day as the CMO, and I gotta say it sucks. I don't know if you guys have actually bought software, and you kind of go through that process, even your own. I mean, think about it. I mean, so many companies, you go to the homepage and you might even want to just watch a video of what they do, and it's like, no, that's locked. You got to fill out 17 fields and your cell phone number. You give all information, you put it in, you're really early at the beginning. All of a sudden you get called right away. Hey, are you ready to buy? You should buy. You should really just buy. If they don't get you to buy, those salespeople to close the deal are incentivized to sell you more than you need, put you on the wrong plan. Maybe to close that deal, they're gonna, oh, that feature's right around the corner. It's coming. Then you think about it, you actually do put out the money, you sign up, and these 8 or 10 people that were wooing me all run for the exits. I'm assigned 1/100th of a customer success person. And then if I do have an issue and I'm on the website and I need some support, I can't find it. It's hard for me to go in there, and I'm working with a team that their primary metric is to spend as little as possible. And all these metrics are guiding and incentivizing these teams. And it's something I just, it's like, I'm an optimist. I believe people are good. They're, if you give them a metric, they want to do good and they want to, they want to advance in their career, they want to get bonuses, et cetera. But a lot of the traditional metrics, though, are optimized around just bad experiences. And so when I got to Zendesk and to some degree Slack, I said, well, what if we try to iterate on that? What if we tried to think about, like, are there some customer-centric type metrics that could drive the behavior for these teams and incentivize them to do the right thing? So a couple of things we did. At Zendesk, we launched NPS, or Net Promoter Score. So a really simple metric. I love it because it's one question. How likely are you to recommend Zendesk in this case to a friend or colleague? Scale of 1 to 10. And the cool thing about the NPS and why I love NPS is a couple things. One, it's a very standard question, and a lot of the companies already run it. In fact, raise your hand here if you've run NPS or track it, right? Yeah, tons of people, right? So it's easy to find the benchmarks, and it's easy to see how you're doing relative to the competition. The other thing which I always encourage is ask the optional question, well, why? I'm always shocked shocked and somewhat scared when I ask the CEO, I'm like, hey, what are the top 3 reasons your company is recommended? Like, you should know that. That's really important stuff, right? Not just to know, like, hey, what is the primary growth engine for you? But also you can start to think about, like, well, a lot of times in marketing, you think about, like, well, how do we describe ourselves and what is the value proposition? Well, guess what? They're giving it to you, right? All the promoters are telling you exactly why they want it. On the flip side, all these detractors, the zeros, the ones, the twos, actually 1 through 6, I think it is, 7, 8 passives, 9, 10 promoters. Anyways, the detractors also telling you, like, here's where you can actually fix things. So when we were at Zendesk, we launched this, and a really interesting story was we started off, and a lot of times when you launch NPS, you're like, well, did we send it to a small sample, statistically significant, and 500 people will see it, and we'll go to data. And I was like, no, like, I want to send it to everyone. Everyone, right? Like, in Zendesk, we had like these 3 primary roles, if you will. We had the owner, we had the admin, and we had the user. And historically, if you kind of go back in the annals of NPS, a lot of times customers or people, they would only survey the owners, which by the way was like the old model of buying, right? Like only if the CIO or the procurement person liked it, that's all that mattered, right? But then you had this revolution of all these very friendly, usable type products, and the users have a huge, impact on it. So we run this survey and we send it to everyone, right? And we get the data back. By the way, I didn't tell Mikkel, our CEO, that we're going to send it to everyone. That was a ask for forgiveness, not permission. Love you, Mikkel. But we got all the data back, right? And I'm sitting in an all hands like this. Everybody's here, and I'm like, hey, we're going to go through the NPS data. And so I'm like, let's do a little survey. And how many people here think that our users scored the highest? And pretty much everybody raises their hands because we're Zendesk and we're all about the users and want to have users, simple, easy to use software. How many people like the admins? How many people think the owner scored the highest? And I'm like, well, hey, here's actually what happened. Like the user scored the lowest. Now, our owner scored the highest, and our CFO, I could see him going, phew. It's like, at least we're not going to have to deal with churn. And we started diving into the reasons, right? Like, well, whoa, why were we scoring low? Now, they weren't like horribly low. They're still higher. By the way, the average, I think, B2B software NPS score is like a -19. So if you're on the B2B side of the house, it just shows you there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of crap being sold out there. But anyway, we start going through the answers. And we're like, why are we scoring so low here? And I'm part of all these product roadmap discussions. And what had happened to us at Zendesk was, we start off SMB, you start moving to mid-market and enterprise. And before you know it, you need to close these deals. And love sales folks. But a lot of times, the only reason they lost a deal is we didn't have this feature. If we just had this feature, I would have closed the deal, right? And so we started building off all these one-off features and these power, double regression, routing, process, workflows, and just all this stuff, right? Because we had to get these big enterprise clients and close these deals. And we started looking through the feedback on the NPS survey, and they were like, they wanted the simplest things. They were like, can you just make the app go faster? Like, I'm a customer service agent. I'm doing this 10 hours a day. When it takes 3 seconds to load on every page, like, that's killing me, right? Or they're like, hey, could you just make search work a little better? I'm used to going in Google and just finding out what I need right away. It was like the most basic things they wanted to, yet we had our roadmap had just kind of devolved into chasing these really kind of power user type features. And that's another reason I really love NPS too, is that it's, because it's only one question, people tend to fill it out. When you ask like these 30 question surveys, you tend to only get your power users, and then your power users, you get this weird feedback loop where they tend to create the roadmap there. So that was super interesting for us. That allowed us to address those issues. We had a SWAT team, they fixed them. We saw the NPS score go up, and it really started to improve there. The other thing that kind of talking about metrics in these go-to-market teams that we tried to iterate on. So when I went over to Slack and I started running the sales and the success teams, I said, hey, let's try something different here, right? Like, we're still gonna measure how much you sell and how successful your customers are. By the way, success is a really fascinating topic, side topic, right? Like, what do they think the role of a success team is, right? Because if your view of a success team is how much they sell, they're probably not going to be helping their customers get adoption and usage. It's just purely how much they sell, right? So I had, again, kind of had this bad experience with sales and success in the past. And I said, hey, let's do this thing where every time after you close a deal, we go back and we survey the people that are part of that deal. And we just ask them, like, hey, you're working with Kelly, your account executive. How responsive was she? How knowledgeable was she? How helpful was she? And we tried to align those softer questions to our values at Slack. And our core values were around courtesy and empathy and craftsmanship. And we wanted to give people a great experience. And so that was really fascinating. We kind of had this transactional CSAT. And I've done the NPS question after a life cycle stage, and it doesn't work very well. Because like I tried it once on the trial, and it was like, hey, how likely do you recommend Zendesk after doing the trial? And a lot of people were like, well, I haven't gotten in there yet, or I don't have enough data, or they get kind of thrown off by the question itself. So I really recommend using a transactional CSAT, and you can do it across all the different stages, and you get very specific feedback that can get to those teams. You can metric the overall team. You can metric the individual person. And again, it's just this idea of all around this customer centricity, which I thought really helped all three of those companies grow. So it kind of brings me up to the third thing that I thought that worked really well for us. We had a different bar, and it kind of continues on this line of, when I worked at Slack, I told the teams, your goal is not to get people to buy from us, or just buy from us, or just renew from us. Your goal is to get them to recommend us. And I just thought that was a higher bar and a harder bar. It really did make you reevaluate all of the tactics that we were doing. And if you think about it, the brand is the sum of every single experience that someone has with you. And a lot of times at the beginning of that experience, they're not even in the product yet. They're dealing with the marketing website, they're talking with sales, maybe they're talking with support, success. All these teams, every single team at a company is going to infer on that experience, either positively or negatively. And we really wanted everyone to kind of recognize that, look, we have to have strong organic growth. Like, I'm going to talk about paid and all the different vehicles you use for there, but literally, if your number one growth driver isn't organic, I would say you've got some issues. It should be the number one growth driver for your company. Now, you can talk about what organic is, word of mouth, SEO, PR, there's a lot of different variations there, but I think organic word of mouth should be the number one driver. And a lot of the clients I work with, that is their number one. Now, I had one that I worked with where I'm like, well, what is your word of mouth? And it was like, well, we have 90% is paid and like 2% is word of mouth. And I was like, oh boy, that's not good, right? And when you think about, for the VCs in the house here, right, and you're evaluating companies' success and how quickly they're moving, usually the number one metric they look at is like how fast you're growing and how efficient is that growth. And when it's all coming from paid, you're going to have a higher CAC payback. Your magic number is going to be off. Your LTV, all the core ratios, right, are just going to be really difficult to move forward there. So anyway, I thought like setting that higher bar and having everyone rally around it was really important. It was easier for me at Slack, kind of having that CRO or chief customer officer where all the customer-facing teams were under one leader. I thought helped a lot. And I think you do see that a little bit more often now. Teams that are starting to organize, go to market under one leader, whether that's a COO, a CCO, a CRO, different names you can put it under. But it does align for a much more unified experience. So you want to grow really fast? Make it easy to use. I cannot stress that enough. So I talked you through like kind of the negatives that you'll see on the NPS. On the detractor side, one of the things that always comes up on the top three for why people recommend, at least companies I've worked at or some of the companies that I advise, is it's always easy to use. The thing that's like, this is like everybody here, this is awesome, right? You're all coming out with your own products and services. This is a golden age of innovation. I love this. By the way, let me take a step back. I want to know, is this mostly like, how many people here are kind of seed stage? Raise your hand. Okay, A's, B's, C's, Z's. Okay, all right. Wide mix, right? Golden age of innovation. We're coming up with all these amazing products, services, putting them together, and it's fantastic. The flip side of that is I saw a stat that the average company has something like 525 applications that they are currently running in their company, right? It's not just yours. Think about that. Like your team might be using 70 different applications, 70 different UI, 70 different processes, workflows. And you run into this really hard situation where, especially for the founders here, like your product better than anyone. You've been using it the longest, it so well, things that, it maybe took you a while to learn at the beginning, like you know cold now. And not only that, but a lot of your employees, the longer they've been there, everybody becomes power users. And so you kind of forget like just having a simple, seamless, frictionless kind of user experience, get people in, start to experience value is so incredibly powerful. And this is one of the things that we did at Slack, which is maybe different than a lot of companies out there. So one was we would actually go back and just work on features that already existed and make them better and easier and seamless and more frictionless. I think a lot of times there's temptation, there's like so much stuff to do that it's like you're always building that next feature when you're on the product roadmap. But you may just want to go back sometimes, this is what we did, say, what are the 3 most used features? Let's just make them better. Like easier, simpler, right? Like simple is so powerful. The other thing we did at Slack, which was a little contrary to kind of the agile, get it out as quick as you can, throw it out there, is we would polish features. So anybody use Slack here? couple people? Wow. Yes. Feel that stock going up. Thank you. For those that use reactions, right? Add an emoji, a thumbs up on a post or something like that. I was there when we started building it. And I saw the first iteration when it came out. It was horrible. It was like this floating box that you had to be in the bottom right corner of the message that would appear up here, and then you'd move over to it and it would disappear. And it was just terrible. And I was like, oh God. It's a cool concept, but I'm like, this is, going to be terrible. And what we did a lot at Slack was we said, well, okay, let's just use it on ourselves, right? And then we came up with another version, like a week later, and another version, and another version. It's starting pretty good, and another version starting really good. And then at a point where I'm like, okay, I think we're ready to go out, but it was like, no, let's just do a couple more, polish it, more seamless. When it launched, I think we had seen 42 versions of it. It was insane, right? But it was really polished, and when it released, as opposed to Agile, and I like Agile, and I've used Agile marketing, but part of it, there's this theory of just get it out there and let users react to it. Well, think about it, if you're coming from this customer-centric mindset, you're just frustrating people, right? And a lot of times it's, especially in the early days, those are your early adopters, those are your advocates, those are your champions, and yet you're like, hey, use this crappy thing and you can beta test it for us. And I just thought wow, that's hard. And so I thought that was something that worked really well for us was we did put a level of polish on it, and we always just talked about how can we make it as simple as possible to use. Let you finish reading it. I don't know. Big Dilbert fan. I grew up loving Dilbert. Great guy. So anyway, pricing and packaging. I love pricing and packaging. In fact, if I'd say if there's a single easy way to kind of boost growth, it's to think about what is your pricing and packaging. And similar to kind of we talked about earlier, I think this is an area that you should be thinking about how can we innovate on pricing and packaging? How can we disrupt it? How can we try different models out? There's a lot of different ways to do it, whether you're selling to the enterprise, the SMB, mid-market, all three, right? A couple of things that I've tried differently in my day is, so one was at Slack, we tried this concept out of we would only charge you, or basically give you credits and refunds back if you stopped using the product. So, and we had this thing, we had a 10-day active window, right? So if you stopped using Slack in 10 days, we would email the admin, or Slack the admin, and say hey, Jane has stopped using the product, here's a credit back. And I thought that was really powerful for a couple reasons. One, it was a nice, just good thing. You're used to getting screwed on pricing and packaging. I feel like my cell phone bill, I'm always just, wow. But anyways, it was wow, here's this nice thing, right? We stopped using it. And they actually gave us a credit back. It aligned Slack's interests with the user's interest, right? We only got paid if people actually used the product. And I think we talked about customer-centric metrics. DAU is another great one. That was really big for us, daily active users. Not just did we get the signups or did we get the money, but how many people are actually using the product, right? And that was a huge, huge thing that helped drive our growth. The other thing was, I think, innovating on the freemium model. So a lot of times in B2B, I think there's a temptation to go, all right, well, let's do a free trial. But it's usually time-bound or user-bound. So you'll have, okay, you can only use it for 2 weeks, or you can only have up to 5 users. And I remember at Zendesk, God, did they hate that 3-user limit. We had a starter plan, it was 3 users, and it was kind of forcing people to upgrade to us once they passed 3, and they hated it, and they felt like they were held hostage. And it was well, what if we did a free trial, but it wasn't time-bound or user-bound? And so Slack, it is a true freemium model where you can go in there, you can have everybody in this room, 1,000 people, 10,000 people on that free plan. And what I thought a really cool side effect of that was people tended to get in there and get value really quickly. So when you have kind of a free model and you're not taking credit cards or putting a bunch of hurdles on there, there's this concept of just get them in there experiencing value, And the other kind of thing that we did was if you kind of looked at the pricing and packaging side of the house for Slack, was a lot of the upgrade drivers weren't put at a user level. So the upgrade drivers for us were around, were aimed at the procurement team. Like, hey, we'll give you consolidated billing. You know, you've got 37 teams at Adobe using you. You have 37 bills. Wouldn't it be nice to have one bill? Or we talk with like IT and go, hey, you know, we'll give you single sign-on. We'll give you user provisioning. We'll let you come in really easily, right? Or folks in HR that had compliance issues and they needed to do exports if there was legal issues, right? All these teams that have to sign off on the deal, which by the way is really hard selling to enterprise, right? Because you're not selling to one person anymore. You have to get all these teams who aren't using your product at all to go, yes, I sign off on this, right? And they've got 1,000 other things to do. So I thought that was really helpful. Having that freemium model, getting them in, experiencing value. And then the one upgrade driver that worked fantastic for us, which I think is a really kind of a cool way to think of pricing and packaging, is most people when they have an upgrade driver, a lot of companies when they have an upgrade driver, it's right at the beginning. Like, hey, if you upgrade, you get this right now. Or you can't get it otherwise. You know, you have to say right away. But what we did is we did like a 10,000 message limit. And so when you hit 10,000 messages, we would start saying like, hey, we're not gonna be able to save any more of these messages, right? You can't search on them in the past, or if you posted a file or whatever it was, and you know, it's been so long. The cool thing was people wouldn't hit that until they were about 6 months in. So that was really powerful because. Use that number out of curiosity. 10,000? Yeah. I think it was the idea that we wanted them to experience the value, frictionless, get a ton of like utility out of it and not be forced to come in until later. And we had to kind of balance it off with some teams that were coming in with like 20 people and some teams are coming in with 3 people. So we tried to shoot for like the 6-month mark. Great question. The question was, why did we choose that number? So that's something I'd really encourage you if you're thinking about a pricing and packaging exercise, is think about like, do you know like what is your big upgrade driver? Like why did they upgrade? Was it a specific feature? And then can you put that on a time lens? Can you put it so that they don't force it right in the beginning? And then even beyond that, can you kind of give the users, if you're doing like a bottoms-up model, which we did at Slack, we also did top-down, and I'll talk about that, but if you have a bottoms-up model, users, can you make it so they get a pretty well-functioning product, right? And a lot of times enterprises, they're willing to pay, and they're willing to spend a lot more money, but also it's not like, they're not paying to get these user features, they're getting to pay all these other teams that need to kind of work and support the software and this rollout. So I thought that was super, super, super helpful. That was one of the great secrets. The other thing I thought worked out with us is we started to move more up market at Slack. We started thinking about we're selling into these larger enterprises. And it's a really interesting dynamic because the enterprises, they don't want cost variability. They don't want like you giving refunds back and the price going up based on how many users it is. They're like, look, I have my budget. This is how much it is for this year, and I just want to lock this down and move on. And so what we tried and experimented with was this concept of an ELA. Let me just heard about enterprise license agreement. We did a little spin on it where basically the idea was large company comes in, wants to work with us. Let's say there's 100,000 people at the company, but you know, there's only maybe about 5,000 people using Slack right now because it's in a couple different departments. And so we would go to that company and say, hey, we'd love to sign a deal with you. Again, you're going to get all these benefits, consolidated billing and single sign-on, security, et cetera. From a pricing standpoint, what we're going to do, or what we're proposing, is we will basically for that first year, you just pay for those 5,000 users. But here's the cool thing: anyone in the company can use it, and we won't charge any extra for all those people. And then at the end of the year, we'll true up. So let's say now at the end of year 1, there's 20,000 people, right? Maybe we sign a 3-year deal, and then we go, okay, when you're 20,000, great. You know, basically you're only paying for people that are using it, right? So it's not like we're trying to pull the rug out from under you. And then we did the same thing and said, okay, you got 20,000 users now. All the rest can try for free, and it would start to grow, right? And because it came under an ELA, we had already gotten the sign-offs from legal and security and IT, so these individual teams didn't have to jump through hoops. They could just start trying it. And we did like this multiple tier, and it was basically like this concept of an enterprise free trial. And I thought that worked amazing. You can also build in pricing discounts on it. So you can say, hey, when you hit 10,000 users, you need to we'll give you a 10% discount. And when you get to 25,000 users, a 25% discount, and et cetera. That's another thing too, don't try to fight that. Procurement needs discounts. It is what it is, right? It's like those people are literally comped on how much discount they get. So you can kind of just factor that in ahead of time. What margin do you want? Pad it up a little bit, and then you kind of get the discount there. But I think that's I don't know if those are all going to work for you, but there's a lot of other ideas there. I guess I'd just say hey, pricing and packaging is it's just ripe for exploration, disruption, innovation on it. One last story I'll tell on this one. So in Zendesk, we were launching our enterprise plan. We were moving more up market. And there was a lot of discussion what price do we go out with it, And do we do $100 or, 75 or 125 or 150, whatever, right? And so I was a big data-driven marketer. So I'm like, all right, well, what is the elasticity of this demand curve? And so we actually ran a test. And we did, I think, $100 and $125. We ran this test, put it on the pricing page, right? And we measured how many people came in, on the pricing page, how many people clicked on, each one of those plans, and kind of went through. What was fascinating was, and by the way, we watched them pretty far through too, not just click on it, but did they sign up to become a customer, how much did they spend, et cetera. And we get the data back. And I'm like, all right, well, obviously the 125 didn't win from a number of people, but maybe it made up with the higher price points, we'll find out here. And we get the data back, and the 125 won on everything. It went on people seeing it, clicking on it, buying it, and it was really counterintuitive. And what I think happened is a lot of times what happens here, right? Everyone here is kind of in SaaS, disruption, startups. All the other people we see are from SaaS, startups, disruption. But yet, if you go outside our little bubble of Silicon Valley, there is insane amounts of money being spent on crappy legacy software. And sometimes they look at all our SaaS pricing and they're like, what? Are you kidding me? This has got to be the cheapest thing. No, it can't be real or whatever, right? And so I think they saw the higher price point and they just said, oh, this is more legit. This is closer to what I'm used to. I always thought with pricing, one way to think about it is how much pricing power you have is the delta between your NPS score and your competitor's NPS score. That's how much extra value you're providing. And by the way, you can figure out what your competitor's NPS score are. You can run surveys to your target audience, ask them if they've heard about the companies, get your aided and unaided recall, but also ask them once they've heard of that company, you can ask the NPS question to them. So you can track not only how you're doing in NPS, but you can track your competitors. And I think that's super valuable as well. Anyways, enough on pricing, but I think that's super, super fascinating. So the next one, hey, how do I think lessons that I thought really helped differentiate some of these brands and help us move faster is just having a brand with a little bit of personality. And this, a lot of times, for the clients that I advise, and I go in and I'll look at their website, I'll look at their product, and I'll go into the product, and I swear, I am looking at this sterile, lifeless, black and white, accept, okay, next, devoid of any type of personality, devoid of any type of color palette, devoid of any type of editorial tone and voice. And I would just say that it's okay. It's okay to have a brand with a little bit of personality. A lot of times I think people come in, and we saw sometimes at Salesforce, someone would come in and go, oh, we're selling up market or higher market or enterprise. We can't have any personality. We have to have suits and ties and talk in a really monotone, boring voice. Go to Oracle's website, you'll see what I mean. And it was I don't know, I've worked for really large companies and I've bought software and brands that had a little personality I tended to like. I tended to have more of an affinity with, tended to develop an emotional connection with them. And I think differentiating yourself is really important because here's the thing that sucks too, guys. Anyone of you that have success here, there will be a VC in a room that will then fund another 10 companies that are just do what you do, right? And it's really easy to become commoditized. So you have to think about how you're differentiating based on the experience, that value, but also just on your core brand. And when you think about what are actual next steps? And by the way, this is one that's I think is awesome too, because sometimes I'll talk with companies that just don't have that next round of funding or don't have a lot of money, and that's fine. I like helping companies grow without just war chests. But this is something anyone can do, right? And so what we did at Slack was we started off and we just said, hey, let's codify this. Like, what are our editorial tone and values? And we talked about saying, like, look, when we write, no matter where we write, we want it to be in a human value. We want it to be fun. We never want to use acronyms, right? We want it to be a little whimsical. And we kind of codified that, right? And then we kind of started training the different teams on it. So our editorial team, our marketing team, our support team, that was actually a really big one because support teams tend to get big. As you get big, support teams get big. Support teams and sales teams both get really big, right? And what we would do is we would actually go back retroactively after one of our support agents had answered a ticket and then review it and go, hey, did this fit our editorial tone and values? Like, and we give them scores on each of them. And so to really reinforce them that, look, all these teams you're experiencing and you're putting out, like what your brand is. Other things we did was just like the loading screen. God, I mean, that could have been like the little damn hourglass, right? Spinning around. Slack takes a little while to load up. But it was like, well, let's just have this opportunity to have some fun quotes or let people customize it with their own quotes, right? The Slack color palette is it's out there. It's a bold tartan. It's just got a lot of colors, right? And it's something that differentiates, distinguishes, right? And as much as, officially, I like to say Slack is an absolute new platform that no one has done before. Communication collaboration has been around a long time. There was some chat being taken place back when I was doing my startup in '96, right? And so you have to really think about like how can you differentiate and where are there opportunities. Another fun one is like to try to like delight them at stages they're not expecting. So one of the things that we'll do with Slack, which you can all do next time your mobile phone app uploads, and just go into release notes, and like literally they're all written with love, and we try to put humor in them, and it just hopefully will make you smile a little bit. And I don't think maybe we're the only ones that do that. Probably some more people do it now, but it's just something that was just a little extraness to put into it. The last thing I'd say at this point is also think about not just the front end website, but the product itself. That's again, like a lot of times marketing will be in charge of product and marketing will be in charge of the homepage, and then product will be in charge of the product. And that's why sometimes you'll see this like, oh, we got a lot of motion, but then you drop in and it disappears. So I think having a team, whether it's a growth team, I've called them delight teams, something that can go in and just for your top features, put some Easter eggs in there, have a little fun with the copy, the tone, the voice. Like that's just a great, easy way to differentiate. So yeah, have a brand with a little bit of personality. So we used organic for all three of those companies to help them grow and scale. But the thing about organic is it doesn't always go where you want to go. Sometimes you want to get into a new geo, a new vertical, a new segment, and you just don't have people recommending you there because no one's there, right? So I am a big believer of using paid vehicles as well to help complement that. You got to look at your effective CAC payback, your magic number. And I think a lot of times in the B2B side of the house, companies will go, again, very transactional. And I've always thought like lead gen is short-term leads and brand is long-term leads. If you can make an investment where people know who you are, they're going to talk about you more, they're going to buy you more, they're just going to have more of a stronger emotional connection. So I'm just going to show you one or two of the campaigns that we've ran. These don't have to be super expensive. So the bottom two were Zendesk ones. And we just had a couple in-house video folks that love video, and we did everything in-house, right? And they made the commercials from scratch. The top ones at Slack, all our designers were busy on the product, so we used agencies, right? One of the top ones cost $1 million, the other one cost about $50,000. So I'll let you guess which one, maybe after saying it. But it's a chance though to rethink like what does actually like a B2B commercial look like, right? And is it just kind of the standard transactional sign up now, free trial DM? Or can you kind of invoke a little bit more of your brand and your personality? So, all right, if the AV gods are with me, I'm going to switch over. And I tried to load these up. And this is the Slack one. So this was a 60-second that we did. And I'll talk about like how we ran it and where we tested it.
All kinds of people on all kinds of teams use Slack to do amazing things.
All right, so that was the Slack one, and then I'm going to show you the Zendesk one.
Has your relationship seen any hard times?
Well, yeah. I think every business goes through hard times with their customers.
When we first met, his customer service was just awful.
I didn't think I had the time or the resources for it.
I would call.
She would call.
I would email.
I was not very good at listening in those days. I was very overwhelmed.
Oh, so I started complaining. I told my bridge club, my sister Lorraine, and my 41,000 Twitter followers.
That hurt. Very public.
So, what happened?
Well, that's when I got Zendesk for my customer service.
That made it a real relationship.
Zendesk helped me become the business I always wanted to be.
I like it when he gives me the business. Don't be old-fashioned. No, it didn't mean anything.
I told you a million times.
Oh, the debates we had on the last 5 seconds, if we included or not. We went and we included it. But anyway, it was a lot of fun to make both of those. And when you run these type of campaigns, you're thinking about not just the emotional connection that you build with user, which I think is really important. And a big lens for me was, hey, did someone smile during it? And it's funny because people always smile at the exact same points. I always watch the audience as it goes here. And the sloth gets them every time, which was funny because the agency told us, like, we can't do sloths, right? Like, there's certain types of animals just don't come out good. We did it right before the Disney one came out with the sloth too. But just like, I've got a little daughter, she's 8 years old, and I was like, should we put it in the sloth? She loves sloths. She's like, put it in a sloth. So I'm like, all right, come on, we'll find a way to get in there. And I do love it. But a lot of it is like, when you run these campaigns, like, it's one thing to just go, hey, we're going to go put a video campaign. This is usually when the VCs get really nervous because you're like, hey, well, that big Series A, B, or C you gave me, like, hey, we're going to use it on advertising. Like, what? So I found it helps to have a very disciplined approach here. And I do think, like, when you start to embrace paid vehicles, a big thing is to start and say, hey, you can measure this stuff, right? Like, awareness is no different than a lot of the other funnel metrics. There's aided recall, unaided recall, sentiment, share voice, share conversation, tons of good metrics out there. At Slack, we started measuring, the minute I got in, when I was employee number 1, I said, let's start measuring it just so we can start to see what our normal baseline is. And then when we ran activities, we could start to see, like, how much did it inflect higher. The other couple things I thought worked really well is when we started off both those campaigns, we ran them in specific cities. So we would just say, hey, we're just going to run this campaign in like Denver and Austin and Seattle, and then we'd have control cities that were similar sizes that never saw it. And we'd say, well, how much does this actually lift our brand? How much did it lift our leads or MQLs, our pipeline, right? And we would do a lot of tests on the actual creative itself. So I didn't show the other Slack one. By the way, the one you saw was the $1 million one. I couldn't get the black and white one to load up. But if you search on it, it's like Slack, Amazing Teams, Rocket Ship. But that one cost $50,000. But there's a huge debate because it performed really well in our initial testing. We're like, well, we spent $1 million on this one. This one's cheaper, but it was actually turned out really good, right? And so we'd run a lot of split tests on the creative to see, who watched it further, how many people shared it, interacted with it, and again became leads. How much did it impact our awareness? We do a lot of pre and post awareness surveys. So after we ran a campaign in a specific geo, we'd run a pre-awareness and then post-awareness and see the lift. And we got it down to where we could say, we know exactly how much a point of awareness would cost us at Slack. And when we started measuring it at first, like, even though Slack's awesome, big in this room, when I would leave outside, again, this little bubble we live in, like, people had no idea what it was, right? And we were like in the 5 or 10% range. And one of the interesting things when we run those surveys, you would ask unaided, so people would just volunteer answers, and they would, like Gmail and Skype. And those things were at Outlook at like 95% awareness, right? But the thing is, we'd ask the sentiment question, and it turns out people hate like Outlook and they hate Skype, right? And so we said, like, look, our goal is not just to beat our competitors, which some people would say was like HipChat and Yammer and Chatter and all those other type of tools. But it's like, no, we actually said we want to get up to like the Skype, Gmail, Outlook. Like that's what we're trying to get for. And so eventually we ran a lot of controlled tests in cities. I've done outdoor, I've done TV. And again, when you have a video, it doesn't just mean you're doing it on TV, right? We did a lot of like Hulu and YouTube, and again, great targeting capabilities there. And eventually we got it, like we had such good response on it, both from a brand and a lead gen perspective, that we ran a national campaign. And even when we ran it for the US national campaign, it was rest of world was our control group. So we could see again exactly what was the lift, was there decay, when did it happen? So anyways, I just say, you know, I know it's like a further step, and a lot of times like, oh, this is a huge thing. It takes a lot of money, but I think you can run these things smaller. You know, you can do them in very specific geos, or even with ABM, there's tons of targeting there now. And you can measure the lift, both on traditional funnel as well as awareness, and I thought that really helped us. So I'm gonna go through these last ones pretty quickly because I wanna leave a little bit time for questions, and I've been going on way too long in this stuff. Testing, this homepage went through 43 iterations. Test, it's really important. By the way, the higher you go, the more horrible we are at predicting what the right answer is. And everyone I worked with at Salesforce and Zendesk and Slack, the hippos, the highest paid opinion in the room, were terrible at predicting which was the right one. So always test the things out because we're terrible. Attribution, I love attribution, multi-channel attribution, multi-touch attribution. It's just really important. And so I just say for those, if you're only looking at first touch, last touch, you're looking at a really distorted viewpoint of the world, and especially in the B2B side of the house, we found that people would have 30 interactions with us before they would sign up to become a lead. And again, if you look at the first or last one, you're missing on all these little nurturing points. So I definitely recommend getting best of breed tech stack there. I've used Convertro. There's a lot of good ones out there, but don't just always default to whatever marketing automation tool because they're just gonna be a little bit more limited. I do love, along that lines, building on sophisticated tech stack, and make sure you get everyone. No, this, by the way, shows you like how crowded every one of our spaces are, because whoever has 6.6, there's another 20 companies that do it. But do think about, you know, everything from predictive lead scoring, lifecycle nurturing, multi-touch attribution. Again, marketing is an engine that basically it's salespeople, but at scale. So that's one way to look at it. It's one of the reasons why we did the ad campaign, by the way. We couldn't have hired 10,000 salespeople. You know, but we could run an ad campaign that could have the very same effect combined with a high velocity model, and it worked really well for us. So anyway, just think about what that tech stack is, and you know, you can throw people at it in the early days, but eventually that becomes very inefficient. You have to think about how you can scale and how you can do that efficiently. Ruthlessly stack rank, you know, everyone that I've ever worked with, everyone has great ideas. You know, there's hundreds of ideas, but at the end of the day, you can do like 3 in a year. I don't know what it is, maybe 4. You know, these top level, high level goals. Just have the discipline to tell your teams what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. It was one of the things I thought Salesforce marked it brilliantly. For anybody that's worked at Salesforce, you do a V2 mom, and basically he would stack rank the top 10 things the company was going to do. He would stack rank his babies, right? Because you had to say, all right, is the sales cloud this year more important than the service cloud or the platform? And he would make those hard choices. Like if you don't prioritize, it's going to happen. It's just someone else is going to decide for you. So I'm a big believer, like make those hard decisions, stack rank, have transparency. That really helped us out. Always a focus on customer stories. So if you do take this play of your customer-centric company and you've got great evangelists out there, take advantage of it. Those are your champions, right? Like think about how you can leverage those connections into different companies. Your website should be showing customers all the time. Mark would always come back to us because we'd always have some cool marketing infographic we want to show. He's like, show the customers, right? Because at the end of the day, the customer can sell much better than you can. They're just, everything they say is going to be more authentic. It's going to be more truthful. So I always say focus on customer stories. I like shared metrics, something we did at Slack. I think the common methodology is to go in and give everybody a different metric and oftentimes a competing metric. And I think that sometimes fosters a lot of politics, a lot of backstabbing. So one of the things we did at Slack is we had a lot of shared metrics at the executive level that we were all kind of comped and bonused on around daily active users, around net promoter score, around this idea of where everybody can help out with it. And that's another thing too, by the way, like NPS, I'm a huge believer in it, but that is not like the marketing team's metric. That's the CEO's metric. Because if you actually go through your NPS results, you'll see They'll give you product feedback. They'll give you feedback on your legal terms. They'll give you feedback on your website. They'll give you feedback on the sales process. Like all the teams contribute to that. So shared metrics, I think, is very nice. And this is the last one, and then we'll get a little bit more time for a little bit of Q&A. So this is something we did at Zendesk. The lesson is just have fun. Because this is hard and it's a long journey. And so we have this thing, I don't know, for those that like SEO, I was a big SEO geek back in the day. And what you'll find is you do your SERPs, people always search for alternative, whatever your company is, because they want a cheaper price or whatever it is, right? So we had a weekend and we're like, well, what if we just kind of made like a fun little video around the term Zendesk alternative? And we did that, and here is that video.
How can I help you? What's your dream? What's the last photo social?
Hey, so how'd you guys get started?
Me and Roddy started the band in '94 in Seattle called Zendesk.
What kind of band are you guys?
No, we're fucking alternative, man.
So what's this album about?
Email support.
Some guy stole our name for his computer company.
What? What kind of company?
They make customer support software.
Benji, shut up! And because he shows up with a bunch of money, now I am doing a customer service concept album. Benji!
Well, Eric is a student of Zen, and in this process, he's being asked to question everything he believes about the freedom of the soul and the truth of expression. But to make all of this happen, we need Zendesk. Well, the other Zendesk.
Oh yeah, customer-centric. Customers. Fuck! The fuck, dude! Come on! How are we supposed to...
So that actually goes for 3 minutes. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to show the whole thing here. But to this day, if you search on Zendesk Alternative and you go past the paid ads, it still ranks. And it brought in a ton of people, and it was just a lot of fun. So, oh my God, that was great. So anyway, that was the last one, and thank you guys very much. So I think we have like 7 minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have. I believe you can, it's like Price is Right, you get to ring a bell in front of you, that little speaker thingy. Or you can just raise your hand. All right, in the back, yes?
Back when you were talking about the enterprise free trial model.
Yeah.
That was down there. I support it for you. How did you come up with like the yearly cycle for truing up? Because that timeline feels a little deep if you're like an early growth stage. So I like this idea, but figuring out the right balance of when to do that true up.
Yeah, it was hard. I think for us at that stage, we were in a position where we could do an annual true up. You know, our cash flow allowed us to. We took several rounds of funding that we didn't even need. So that did allow us to kind of cover that delta and imbalance there. I think for every company it's going to be different, but I do like this idea of kind of this frictionless trials where you can get everyone in the organization using it, experiencing value, which is a little bit of a dichotomy versus the classic like top-down sell and try to sell into everyone from there. Cool. Question or person behind?
Sorry, no microphone.
No worries.
I like what you said about brand and using that as a point of differentiation. I kind of grew up in brand, but now, kind of in Silicon Valley, I feel like it's all about growth, right? Experimentation and testing, and I feel like brand gets poo-pooed a little bit. Can you talk about, like, on that point, what is the right time and how do you start to insert that brand conversation into the growth conversation?
Yeah, so question was around brand versus growth when you move it. I love both. I do love growth marketing. Good growth marketing, no. I hate slimy growth marketing where someone gets access to your address book and somehow spams every single connection you have. Boo. But I do like, having that balance of growth and brand. And I just say, like, every company's different. Some companies I think are actually going to want to do more brand. Some companies want to do more growth stuff. I think basically, if you do have a little bit more quant side of the house, or you're working with someone that's a little bit more data driven, you really need to establish those brand metrics and show them, hey, there is an improvement here. And I think just a lot of people have maybe been burnt in the past when it's like, let's just spend a ton of money on brand stuff and it looks good and there's no accountability there. So I think it's just a balance, and trying to put it in at the right time can have long-term payoffs. And I'm a big believer, there's the brand of like the big paid media vehicles, but then there's also brand just like, what does your product look like? Who do you stand for? Do you have a mascot? Even like the Zendesk mascot we had for a while, kind of the booty character, like people loved him. I mean, that was such a differentiator for us. And even like love your help desk, that was one of the initial slogans which came out, and people just it really resonated well with them. Cool. We'll go front here, and then we'll do that one next. Yeah.
All right. So, what's the most important thing that you learned when growing marketing teams from one person to tens of people?
Yeah. So I've grown from like 1 to like 50 or 60. Early in my career, I definitely hired for domain expertise, and I do a barrage of questions on whether they were SEM or marketing ops. Later on, I think the most important thing is to develop a really good culture. So actually to hire people based on if they're a culture fit, and there's a lot of bit of, maybe disagreement if that's the approach to go. But so for instance, at Slack, again, our values are around customer centricity, courtesy, empathy, craftsmanship. And one of the questions I would always do is when we interviewed people, it's in the back of my head, I would say, if this is a half an hour interview, how many times did they actually say the word customer? And if they never said it once, I'm like, sorry, you're not very customer centric, right? And I think people having the right values and how you align them, you can just be a little bit more harmonious with it. So I'm a big believer in getting the right core values. And then beyond that, just think about like how you build these teams up, having the right disciplines. I like to build marketing ops teams first, because you have to have that data structure. Then think about product marketing, how you explain it, the messaging, positioning, the narrative. That's really important. That's a foundational element. Then think about your paid campaigns, content marketing, lifecycle nurturing. But that's usually the sequence that I go in. Cool, yes, in the back.
Free trial stuff. So some will say that by offering a free trial, you don't get genuine feedback on your product because you're not getting genuine feedback because there's no skin in the game. There's no skin in the game means they're not using the product to its full capability. What are your thoughts on that? And the second question I have around your marketing, the Zendesk commercial with the innuendo at the end. It seems, from what I'm seeing out there, the brands that are really being successful out there, like what Fernando Macado's doing over at Burger King, are taking chances on ads, if you will. Procuri, that media group, another one.
Yeah.
Do you find that that's going to be the new level?
Yeah. So go in reverse order. I think it's just, when people are talking about your brand, you can generally consider success. And even the whole, what was the IHOB? Did you guys see that? Burgers, like, I really seen it talking about it, right? And then Wendy's goes back. And I mean, if I was at IHOP, I would be so happy, right? Because people are just talking about it and it's going viral, right? So well done on their part. On the free trial side, I can just say, God, I've done a free trial at every single company I've been with, and it's always worked out really well. And I think there are always a lot of traditional arguments against it. No skin in the game. Oh, is this going to kind of like commoditize or cheapen our premium products? But in every case, it's just worked out wonderful. And I would say that the beauty of a free trial too is that you got to imagine that all those free users, those are your champions, your evangelists. Essentially, it's a marketing channel, right? And they're out there and they're talking about you, word of mouth. And even if it's SMBs, because SMBs are usually the most price sensitive that use it, they have friends that are, well, let me ask this question, right? Raise your hand if you work for a current company that's over 500 people. Okay, only a couple, right? So the rest of you would probably be considered SMB. Yet I'm guessing all of you have friends that work at larger companies, and you probably talk and share strategies, right? So this massive free trial segment is out there, and they're your organic word of mouth, right? They're recommending you. The other reason I think a free trial works out really well is it is a competitive moat. So again, when that VC in the back says, hey, this is very good, I'm going to invest you, what do all those folks do? Oh, let's find our way in. We're going through the SMB, right? And so when you have a free plan out there, you're essentially starving the oxygen from those other startups trying to get in and try to push you up market. And that's usually the SaaS cycle of death, right? Start up in SMB, you get pushed up to mid-market, get pushed up to enterprise on your Oracle, and then finally you just go the way of IBM or whoever, right? So anyways, I like free trials. Cool. I think one last question I'll do super quick, and then we got to go. Sorry, I'll do it afterwards.
When you're building out your marketing, similar to his question, when you're building out your marketing team, so you have a team of like 2 or 3, who would be your most important hire? Like what role would you specifically be looking to hire?
The marketing ops.
Marketing ops.
Yeah, I think just having a foundation of metrics, the right tech stack, the right attribution, it's just, I mean, marketing, you spend dollars in people's time, right? You have to be able to know how it's working. Cool. All right, thank you guys so much.